Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Joystick Show. We have a good episode for you today. We're going to first talk about the new Dune video game. Then we're going to get into Dune 2 out in theaters right now. And stay tuned for after that. We're going to be talking about the new FX show, Shōgun. Stick around.
The Joystick Show.
How's it, Shticklers? The Joystick Show is back to talk story about things we've read, watched, or played. Shakas and mahalos for sticking around. If you fancy what you hear, please like and subscribe on the platform you frequent. I'm your co-host, Drake. That's Thomas.
What up, what up?
And that's Scott.
How's it?
And welcome to episode 132 of the Joystick Show. Tonight we've got something short and sweet. We're going to be talking about Dune and Shōgun. So we're just gonna get deep into it right now.
Yeah, let's just Dune it.
Yeah, let's Dune it.
Let's get a
Dune it.
Dune.
Dune or die.
Exactly. Yeah, we're going heavy into Dune.
Together.
Oh, damn! You got another one?
Wow, Dune together.
Dune it to me, baby, one more time. I don't know.
I'm Zendayaing for you to Timothy Chalamet all over it.
Wow,
Maybe.
Impressive.
I feel like you
Maybe.
forced that last name.
I did.
Yeah,
force it,
yeah.
Yeah,
You were almost there. You just got a little too greedy.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
did kind of. It was rough. It was a rough entry.
So, Legendary Pictures did something really smart too. They announced a Dune game as well, a survival MMO called Dune Awakening. Let's start there because we just watched the trailer for it.
Yep.
So again, super smart off the heels of Dune Part Two and all the success. Everywhere today was like, Dune's the best movie ever made. Oh my, $178 million opening weekend. All of this is so great. What do you guys think about this trailer? I don't feel like it gives us a lot, and yet like it's just enough. I don't know how you guys feeling about Dune Awakening.
The game looks good. Like whatever engine they're using to create the environments, it looks very similar to Dune 2 in terms of its like color palette, its cinematics, its overall like design of the world. But in terms of gameplay, we know nothing. We don't know anything about the story. We don't know how it's going to play. We do know it's survival, so supposedly you're going to have to collect water and ride sandworms. But other than that, it's just speculation. But if it does as good as Dune 2, or if you're really into Dune, then I assume it's going to be real good? Question mark?
Yeah. It doesn't show that you can ride worms, but I hope that you can,
If
right?
you can't
That's
ride
such a
fucking
big-
worms, then what are we doing?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, it looks cool. I think if they're gonna make a survival game like they are, the Dune setting is the perfect sort of environment for that.
Yeah.
Like
Arrakis.
we've learned from the movies that it's really hard to survive there.
My planet is so beautiful when the sun
So
is
hard.
low.
Yeah.
So much dust.
So much spice.
Dust. Dust is not sand or spice.
Dust.
It's a dust.
Like in the
It's
bad
glitter.
translation version or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
This
It's
is the
crazy.
swap
Their
meet version of
broom
Dune.
situation must be crazy because I didn't see any like sand inside of like the temple areas or the inside, so they must be real good at brooming.
Yeah, and you ever try to sweep up glitter? That shit's
Bruh,
impossible.
I know.
Yeah, good point.
Like, but they get it done in Dune.
They get it done, yeah. So they know. They have the
get
technology.
nose to the ground, get it done.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, there's a lot of nose to the ground, I'm sure.
Yeah,
They don't have vacuums in
Don't
this world. They
waste.
just use people's nose.
yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to get visions up in here.
Spice it up.
yeah. All the maids are just floating around, like just tapping the wall. What the hell are you guys doing? Get back to work. The Gum Jabbar music
adjustment?
playing. So anyway, we don't have much information about the game beyond that. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. Again, since it's an MMO, massive multiplayer online, apparently or assumedly you're going to be playing with like a bunch of random people out there in the world. It looks like you're just a Fremen or you're like somebody maybe from House Atreides that survives, if I had to guess. But you get to wear the still suit. We see the ornithopters, which looks tight. It doesn't show any hand-to-hand combat, which is weird, right? Because a lot of what we see from the movies is like them
Yep.
fighting with knives. I didn't see any of that. It looks like you can build a house and you could build a motorcycle thing.
Yep.
Yeah, it looked like there was a lot of tech involved.
Yeah, it's like
So,
Dune, but
maybe there's-
Badlands.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Scott, you mentioned something about the worm.
Oh yeah, the worm in the trailer.
Shai-Halud.
Was that-
Shai-Halud.
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 Shai-Halud. Duuuust.
Shai-Halud.
The worm in the the worm in the trailer looked different than what I remember the worms looking like in the movie. It looked more like the gravoids in Tremors.
Yeah,
But you were saying
True.
that I guess when the worm kind of encloses on itself, it kind of looks like that. So maybe I just like kind of missed that in the movie.
Yeah, it looks. You're totally right, though. It does look more Tremors than Dune. But when I rewatched it, part one, for some reason I was watching the part where Kynes sacrifices herself. Spoiler alert for the old movie. She and you watch how the mouth comes up, even though it looks perfectly round, it's like in sections. So it is kind of like that when it closes. But yeah, I don't know why they didn't just make it perfectly round like the movie. I don't know. It was weird. But I mean, such a minor nitpick. Obviously we'll have to see what it looks like in the game. But when it actually comes out. But I'm sure that has to be a top comment, right? Like people are like, the worm's mouth looks different.
Yeah, you
Right?
think.
I don't know. That's what I would but
That's not Sandworm.
that's not Shai-Halud. Muad'Dib does not approve. I don't know, whatever, Iraqi
Whoever's
terms.
writing these things, however they sound.
Yeah, however they sound. They sound dumb, but they also fucked up the worm. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think mostly though, it looks pretty accurate to the movies. And yeah, I don't know if we have anything else to say about that. Otherwise, we could just get right into Dune Part 2.
Let's get into the number 2, the
Let's get
Duuuust.
into it.
The
All right.
second.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Why don't you guys both put out some awesome things on social media? We got our threads going. Drake's whole review is on there on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We got Scott's review. So check those things out. But right off the bat, tell us just initial thoughts going into the movie and coming out of the movie. No details, no spoilers, just kind of immediate thoughts on it.
I mean, I thought it was, it didn't really live up to Madam Web, but
That's for sure.
it wasn't bad.
Nothing could beat that $3 trillion movie.
Yeah, I know. It's made so much money. Like, how are you even... I think Dune 2 is doing something that sequels typically don't, which is build upon the first and give us more, not only cinematically but story wise. I mean, granted, the IP is historically one of the largest things you could get into.
For books.
The books wise, yeah.
Yeah. The movies and shows did not really land well.
No. Yeah. The book,
Back in the day.
the OG book is kind of like the preeminent sci-fi fantasy reason why Star Wars exists type situation.
Yeah, I think it sold either 16 million copies or 60 million copies. I can't remember.
It went platinum.
One of those.
It went platinum for sure.
It did.
Or diamond, I would say. But in terms of the character base, they continue to do a good job at building these characters up, having their growth with each other and outside of each other be a focal point. Adding in the new characters, I think, added a lot of zest and flair. It wasn't too forced. I mean, I definitely think that we need to see more of them for them to matter. For me personally, just because if this is hypothetically, if this is the final Dune and we don't see the rest of those characters, it's like, well, he's just putting in big names to put in big names. But they did add a lot of extra oomph, especially because some of these characters have very particular vernaculars or ways of speaking, etc. So that was very interesting to see it in this world. The culture of the Fremen really shone in this Dune numero dos, and I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, is how that culture really succeeds in this element, even though you could make the argument the Bene Gesserit have their claws into everything across the universe, but the Fremen still happen to be these free men in this enclosed planet that happens to take lives more easily than not.
So you liked it?
I would give it a solid. If it was out of a good or a not good, I'd definitely give it a good.
Okay. No, yeah, I think you made some great points. Yeah, I was like, wait, does he like it or does he?
I may or may not like it,
not?
but
Yeah, it was like a really good description of the movie. But yeah, I
Right.
didn't really know if you liked it or not.
Yeah, I was like,
I
is
just
this what
described the movie.
I was like,
you
is
know,
this what
up
he
to
thought
you.
before going in or after? And then if this is
Yeah,
after, is it good or bad? Yeah. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I really love this movie. I
See,
watched
Drake,
the
That's how you do it.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just kidding.
You love it so much. Why did you marry it, Scott?
first one good, second one gooder. No, yeah, I watched the first one the night before going in, and it's funny. I think it made me realize how ADD I am when watching movies sometimes because it's been a while since I watched the first movie. Watching it again, I'm like, I feel like I missed some stuff like that I was catching this time around. I have this habit sometimes when I'm like watching a movie for the first time, whereas I'll get caught up with like, oh wow, that's a cool shot. Oh wow, that's like I'm just like caught up in like details that aren't important, and then the conversation on screen will end like, and that's why she never came back. And I'm like, fuck, what were they talking about? Why she never came back? Like, and then I play the game of try and put the puzzle together based on everyone else's conversation. So yeah, the night before I was able to like actually like really watch it in depth. So good. And then went into the second movie, fully ready. And I really enjoyed it. I think Drake, you're right about that. Like all the new characters, they did add to the movie and they didn't take away from the original characters we got in the first film. Granted, some characters were shown more. I think because their story arc was like told throughout that movie, like Austin Butler in particular. I know like Florence Pugh, there's gonna be more to that. Like this movie did so good, I don't see why they won't do the second book and if that keeps making money, just keep going on, But we're gonna get more of these characters if they do more movies, so I'm not really worried about that. But what little we got from them, I thought they did a really good job. I really enjoy these actors, so I know they're big names, but I also enjoy their acting chops. Like they're good. It's not just like throw in some musician in just because they're a hot musician right now or something like that.
Like Ed Sheeran in Game of Thrones.
Lin-Manuel Miranda in Dune 3.
Drake hates it.
I'm not a fan.
I'm from the Dune. What's up? Be you soon. You're a buffoon. And it's like, what the fuck, Lin-Manuel? Why is Lin-Manuel in every universe?
They'll give him like 30 seconds of fucking screen time doing that, and then you're like, oh, what? You just took me out of the freaking film, dude.
Yeah. It was a spice hallucination.
Oh my god.
Dust.
Then it's dust.
Dust.
But, well, this movie did a good job. I didn't feel like there was any part of it that took me out of the Dune universe. It was shot incredibly well. CG was amazing. All the actors were freaking awesome. I was enthralled in the story, and it did make me want to go. I know you got a chance to go through the first book, but while watching the movie, I'm like, man, I want to get through this book because it's just like bonus stuff, that I'm not seeing. They're already showing so much, 2 movies worth, but that book is thick. So I know there's like a lot of stuff that they can't show us or fit in or whatnot. So I do want to check that out. But overall, I really love it.
Very nice. Yeah, I agree. I think I really loved it too. There was just this part of me where, and I think this is the point of the movie, it didn't sit well for me, and I was like, ugh. And you talked about how you go into movies and watch things, and we got some insight into the way Drake's brain works about movies, and mine was like, I found myself, because of this show and Challenge Accepted Now and everything, like I get into the weeds, and I was reading it and I watched Dune Part 1. I think it was my 4th time watching Dune Part 1 going into Dune Part 2. So I felt like I really knew it. I felt like there was like no detail that I had missed in Dune Part 1. And so there was a lot of expectation, I guess, that I put on it. But man, like there was certain things that threw me off because I had just finished the book. Like there's parts where it differs. Before we get into the specifics though, I just want to say, to your point too on the young cast, like there's no way you put this cast together without thinking super far ahead. Like this is young Hollywood at its top, right? Florence Pugh, Austin Butler, Timothy Chalamet, and Zendaya are arguably like the top two boy-girl celebrities up and coming, right? Like someday they're going to be our Tom Cruise and Angelina Jolie. Like that's, I think, that's their destiny, so to speak, right?
Yep.
So yeah, 100%. And they carry this movie and they do such a good job. The acting is so fucking good in both movies. They're incredible. And then you throw in Austin Butler, who's been in everything lately that's been crushing. Elvis, Masters of Air. I think it's called like The Bike Rider that he's coming out soon with Tom Hardy. Like all of these things, dude, he's killing it. Obviously, Florence Pugh has been that girl for a second now. There's a huge path forward with them. There's so much I liked about it, but I couldn't help walking away feeling a little bit weird about what this said. Man, this is getting real serious, but like what it said about like religion, society, and all that stuff, where I was like, I know it's supposed to make me feel weird, but I do. Did you guys get any of that?
Is that what you said?
I do.
Dune 2 or
I do
what?
feel weird.
Dune 1 and then I Dune 2 after.
Oh wow! I see. Don't Dune it. You know what I mean? Well, the Bene Gesserit are essentially like they're not necessarily a cult, but they are to a degree witches. Right? Like you kind of find out in this movie that they essentially have controlled the narratives of multiple different cultures across the universe, and
for like millennia, or like centuries or something.
And have been doing that through any means necessary, whether that's using their bodies or using their powers or et cetera, et cetera. And to see that it has such a hold, and even though the Fremen may have an idea that this is taking place, they're still so deep in the belief, and it's just interesting to see in such a futuristic society, sci-fi fantasy, that religion in this situation plays into a part where you would think in that day and age it wouldn't necessarily be as prevalent, and whether that's a take on the Fremen as like more of a common folk, and whatever the Bene Gesserit control is more of like the technologically more advanced type situations. There's a lot of conversations to be had there, but
I mean, yeah, because I feel like in this movie, right, this whole time, Dune Part 1, you see Paul become like the sweet kid. His dad gets murdered. He like loses everything. He's on the run. He has to figure out how to survive now. And then in Dune Part 2, we slowly, in a way, start seeing him build a cult. And that cult is kind of an army, because they like, as funny and as awesome as Stilgar is, which Javier Bardem is like so good in this movie. Oh yeah, he's just like what, or like Lisa Al-Gaib, like anything he does, right? Like I'm sure you guys have seen the memes. It's like my parents asked, "Hey, can you help me set up Netflix?" I set up Netflix, and then their face, and it's just like a picture of Stilgar, like shocked and in awe. He's on Al-Gaib, right? So it's like literally
one of my favorite characters.
He was so good in it. But he shows that fanatical side, like I'm gonna believe in him no matter what. And so like I think in my perspective, Paul does make a cult.
Yeah, I in terms of the general idea of like the cult situation, it's so hard, I think, for the Fremen to understand in that context what Paul is doing, because Paul definitely hints at it and says things out loud where you would think people can hear him, where essentially his mom, a Bene Gesserit, had this vision, and this vision moving forward is because Paul was then able to do Bene Gesserit things when he's not supposed to, hence the reason why he yelled at the top Bene Gesserit lady. She was like, "Abomination." And
did she say that to him?
She said that to him, yeah. When they were confronting Christopher Walken, and she's like talking, she's like, "This is supposed to be the way." And then Paul Atreides is like, "Shut the fuck up." But he says it in like one word.
Silence.
Yeah. Silence. And she goes, and she goes, "Abomination."
Which is cool, because that silence is what she says to him in Part 1. Now he gets to say it back to her in Part 2. But what's interesting about that abomination thing is in the books, the way they differed, right? In this movie, Lady Jessica has the baby right? It's still in her stomach. She doesn't give birth yet, but she like communicates with the baby. In the books, I think it's Aaliyah or Alina. I'm forgetting what the name is, but Aaliyah is born And rather than it taking place over months like what it does in part 2 of the movie, it actually takes place over a couple of years. So Lady Jessica gives birth. She basically gives, I forget what it's called, but like she gives birth to like this little human that's almost fully formed. Like,
Weird.
you know, has all the hair, can like talk, walk, basically.
Creepy.
Real creepy. And in the final battle in the books where it's Fade versus Paul, the Bene Gesserit lady says she calls her an abomination. So it's interesting. I didn't catch that she says it to Paul, which is like interesting how they adapted things.
Yeah. And the idea too of like Paul's redemption story, utilizing the Fremen because the Fremen have the story from the Bene Gesserit originally and is the prophet, etc. Using that to gain revenge for his father and his family and hopefully restore his honor, etc., etc. I mean, granted, however noble that may seem, the grander scheme of utilizing a people, hence the reason why Zendaya's character is essentially saying that the Fremen are going to be enslaved by Paul and his like moving forward of all of these things. And everybody kind of knows these things, but like everybody's just willing to just believe what they want to believe, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. I feel like there's no choice. Like they've already like been these prophecies, this religion, these things are so ingrained in them they can't get away from it.
Yeah, it's very.
So now they're like, all right, full steam ahead. We got all the signs. Even when Paul's saying, "I am not this guy," Stilgar's like, "Yes, you are."
He's like, "You're so humble."
Yeah, exactly.
Proof why he is him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all of that was hilarious, but yeah, it does. But it also makes me like look at the world. I'm like, God, is that a thing that happens? And I feel like it is, and like now that makes me scared. And I think this is why those feelings, I walk away and I'm like, like I love it. I think it's so good. But I'm like, ugh, like I don't know. I think that's just why I felt weird coming out of there.
Is it a narration on how the potentiality of religion can be utilized in a means to control?
Yeah, because it's like in this, we know he can see the future, at least like some futures or whatever. Like some are destined, and some are like maybe might happen. But because of that, he can shape the narrative, just like you're saying. Like when it applies, like when people are writing books and like, let me rewrite the book. This is what they meant. Like it's kind of like a way of shaping the narrative, whether for good or evil or whatever it is, like whatever their motive is. Like sometimes there's something there, and it's like that is kind of scary because then you're just trusting like hopefully they're good. They say they are. And like when we're watching this movie, like I know we were talking off air about it. Like Paul is presented to us like a hero, like he's gonna do no wrong. He's gonna like be a just leader. Yeah. And then he starts
he's like his dad. He's the hero. He's gonna like save the day.
And once he starts seeing like this is the path, I mean, we only know because he says it out loud.
This is the way.
I see a narrow path where this works out. Like he's already decided, like, I'm gonna have to do all these bad things for the greater good. Like in his head, right?
Whatever that is.
It is scary.
But that's the thing. Like it is like it feels like to me he's, and I don't know, maybe some people argue this is it, but like he's not really like, they're technically free. They got rid of the Harkonnens. They don't need to go on and wage a war across the galaxy. They could just be like, we got Arrakis back. We're good. But they're like, no, this dude who just joined the Fremen, like we're going to war with him. Whatever he says, we're going. And I think that's like the crazy part. It's like they could stop there, but they don't, because
you can make the argument that the spice is such a commodity across the world that anybody is going to be willing, any house is going to want to step in and wage war in order to control that. So, hypothetically, yes, if the Atreides do, destroy the houses, then potentially the Fremen could technically be free if there is no civilization that wants to control the spice or have it, etc. That could be one idea, but at the same point in time, that's not super obvious within the nomenclature.
That's true. But yeah, Paul also says like he who can destroy a thing ultimately controls it. Yes, and they know now that they can destroy it. So like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's just interesting that this movie, which is like going to be a blockbuster movie, awesome sandworms, like dope knife fights, like just, like at its core is making me, I guess I'm more fascinated by it, makes me question the ideas of religion, of leadership, of belief. And I again, maybe I'm thinking way too deeply about this. This is probably not where I should be going with it, but yet I had those feelings. And also it's like it's totally justified. It makes sense why Paul becomes this person. And yet at the same time, I'm like, God, it feels like such a bait and switch, even though I know that it's coming, It's like, man, this whole time, you're right. Like, I think, Scott, you were saying, it's like we're watching the rise of a villain. I think you compared it to Breaking Bad the other night. And you're like, you're right. That is a good way to do it. It just like, I don't know. I was just like, God, I want Paul to be good, but he's not. And like, these people are going to follow him and get murdered. And they're going to murder billions of people because they're just like, we believe him. I don't know. I think that's why it's sitting weird for me a little bit.
I also thought like it was the other thing that like to me when I heard all that and whatever, like it makes sense for the story. And I think it probably resonates with everyone because everyone on some level gets that same connection you're saying. Like there's a familiarity to it, just told in a different, way, like in an interesting way. And then the world's interesting enough, and it's like it's new enough to like keep you interested, but it's also a familiar subject.
Like idea,
but,
Like
the thing I was thinking about though is like when he's gonna like, what does he say? Like, let's bring him to paradise or something, or
Show them
paradise.
Show them paradise,
and they're like, yeah, and I'm like, so they're gonna
paradise
the planet.
You're gonna go to Hawaii.
Like, have the same advantage they have here. Like, are they gonna be badasses on other planets? Like,
just gonna bring
the
sand,
reason why they are so good.
They're gonna bring the dust.
We're gonna bring so much dust.
We're
gonna see.
We're gonna blow dust in all of their face.
Because remember, like, there's a part where, the general guy, what's his name?
General
Grandpa.
General Mills.
Thanos.
General Josh Brolin. Yeah.
Which is a funny thing. I was like, Drax will never be Thanos. He never does. But there's a part where he's like, you did all this with 200
Gurney Halleck.
men?
Oh yeah.
He's like, you did all this with 200 men? Like, do you know what kind of achievement this is? Like, that's crazy. But yeah, it can be done there because they can hide the sand. Like, they have the home field advantage. But like, I just don't understand, like, if he takes the fight outside of the planet, how he
are they going to have the same advantage? Yeah. You're so right. There was a thing that I was listening to, and like this kind of really broke it down for me, which was the reason why the Emperor chose the Atreides to go there was like a couple different reasons. But like, obviously, the Harkonnens were the richest, right? Because they were controlling spice for so long. The Atreides weren't the richest, but what they were was they had the best military force. So they had the best fighting force. So he was afraid that the Emperor, that Leto would take over because he had the best fighting force. So give him the harshest thing where he knows the Harkonnen are going to try to betray him and let them basically infight and destroy themselves. So like, basically Paul had all the training of the best fighting force in the galaxy. Now he's brought to the hardest, toughest people. And so
he can train them up.
Yeah, and like I guess that's the idea, is that he was such a good leader. He just had to take what they were already good at and now unify them and say, hey, I'm going to train you in the ways the Atreides were trained. And you have Gurney Halleck, who would train me in sword fighting or knife fighting in the ways of strategy of war. And now
okay, that's true.
Yeah, we have the hardest.
He's a Harkonnen as well too.
Right. Okay, so yeah. All right, let's go into full spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler. Pour that milk on there.
So yeah, it's kind of mentioned before. I think in other ways. No, I guess it's kind of a surprise. I'm trying to think if there's some point where it's kind of hinted at. But you finally, because the Bene Gesserit mom in the first movie tells Lady Jessica that you needed to have a girl, and we're wondering why. Well, we realize in this movie that Feyd-Rautha is like, he was going to be the male version of Paul, who was supposed to be a girl. Their houses were supposed to marry, then produce a child, and that child would have been the Kwisatz Haderach, right? And because they would come from two Bene Gesserit mothers, the Bene Gesserit would be able to control that kid, and then, you know, they would be able to shape destiny however they want moving forward. Well, I think it hits a little harder in the book, and it seems to make sense a little bit more in the book. It's not, I don't feel like it was explained as well in the movie, but I don't think it is as, I don't know, how do you guys feel about it? Like, is it as important? Because it is important, but I don't feel like, to me, it didn't hit as hard as the book was able to deliver. But again, you know, books are able to explain things.
I feel like you got to really think about the meaning of it. That
Right.
It's obviously it's been planned from a long time ago to have that connection, and that when Paul realizes that he needs to kill Elvis Presley, that essentially he's going to end up
Cousin, huh?
to a degree. He ends up taking up the mantle of not the Harkonnen King, but like he is technically
not Baron, then Baron.
Yeah, so he's killed both of them, and in that culture, I believe when you murder the best, you become the best, right?
Yeah.
So
their whole thing is like whoever is the strongest can lead.
So now he has the Harkonnen money and the Harkonnen army, if that happens to be the case, right? Because he's now defeated Baron and not Baron, and so you have that. Plus, you have the fact that he was, he has a Fremen force, and then on top of that, he's essentially
the Sardaukar too.
Yeah, he has the Sardaukar. He's part Bene Gesserit blood. He has Bene Gesserit mom and Anna Taylor-Joy in the background as well too. So it's like it makes sense for him to be that point at the tip of the spear, cruising through the universe. But you really got to think about that. I mean, unless you
on the surface, on the surface, you're like, wait, he's related to the enemy. It's just like, maybe that Star Wars moment where, I don't know, I guess it wasn't a surprise to me. So it didn't really like hit as hard in the movie. And that's one thing where I was like, I'm cursed with knowledge. Like I knew too much from the book. And so I was like waiting for things, I was just waiting for certain things to happen.
That's fair too. Like, I think that's huge. Reading the book before going to the movie, it'll always feel like a summary of what you already consumed.
Right.
And you're wondering the whole time, how are they going to tell this? I wonder how they're going to show this. Oh, they didn't show that. Interesting.
Yep.
Oh, that's where they went with that. Like I read The Martian before going in to watch The Martian. Martian's a great book. I did the audio version, and the guy who narrates it sounds. I knew Matt Damon was going to be him. And then the narrator sounded like a very Matt Damon type person.
Yeah.
And it's like 10 hours worth of like Matt Damon basically on Mars. And then you watch the movie, and it's like a super summarized, great movie. Right. But I'm like, oh, there was so much more cool stuff. Like, it felt like it just like washed over a bunch of cool stuff. And the whole movie, I'm like, I wonder what they're going to do. I wonder that. So I can only imagine after going through 21 hours of Dune and then watching like a 2, maybe almost 3-hour movie, you're like, oh, okay. Like, it's hard to enjoy it as a first time viewer, I would assume.
Totally. Yeah. So I'll just briefly talk about some of the things they changed or omitted or that. And then we'll just kind of get into like all the best parts. So one thing they changed, right? Lady Jessica doesn't have her kid. It's because she doesn't have her daughter. She's still in her stomach. And then like, how did you guys feel about this where the baby's basically talking through Jessica to Paul? Did that work for you? Or were you like, that's kind of weird?
Yeah. For a second, I thought she was like pretending that the baby was saying things. And I'm like, lady, just say what you want to say. Your baby says this.
Say what you need to say.
The baby was, but there it's funny because you're saying in the book like it was the baby was born and then it's walking around and talking. I feel like watching the movie. There's a point where things are going on and you see Harkonnen like around some kind of grid and they're like look like they're linked into it and the things are kind of like appearing and disappearing and stuff. And I'm like, man, I was thinking. The crazy world this guy built and put into this book, like it's amazing that we're in a time now where like someone can bring something like this to life, and like someone who's maybe not even that into sci-fi can enjoy such a wacky world and have it be taken seriously.
Yeah.
So I feel like a walking baby talking might have like just tipped too far.
Too much.
Like I've been like, what? Okay, like Jar Jar or something. Like it would have been like just a little too silly. But the things they got away with already though was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it gets crazier in the deeper books too. Like really, really strange. I don't even know if anybody's gonna get to this point, but there's like half worm people, and they can run really fast because they're half.
Still?
No, they're just half worm people, and then like one can like just sprint super fast.
Do they look at worms, or are they just like?
Yeah, just look it up on your own time. It's pretty strange. So you're right, though. I do give you. Yeah, I give you that. There was another thing where, shoot, what is it? I'm kind of blanking now. Oh, because of that, because the baby wasn't born in the books, Paul's sister is actually the one that kills the Baron instead of Paul in this movie. She uses the Gumjabar just like we had shown tested against Paul. The same thing was tested against Fade in this movie, but she kills the Baron in this. And then I think she's called like Aaliyah with the knife or the point or something like that in the future. But so they omitted that. I'm trying to think. There's like one other thing. Someone else take it away. But like I know that those things were kind of not there. So when I was expecting it, it was just like, oh, okay. Oh, this is what it is. Thufir Hawat, who was in the first movie, who was the Mentat for the Atreides. He wasn't in this movie. In the books, what he's doing is he's slowly trying to set up Fade against his uncle. So he's kind of like sowing seeds of doubt from inside, and then like the whole time you hear the inner monologue of the Baron, and then Fade. And like the Baron is scared of Fade. At the same time, he's like, I'm going to send him to Arrakis, get him off of me. And then, like I'll live a good life where we're at. And then by the time I'm going to die, then he can come back and he can take over for me. That way he like doesn't kill me prematurely. And then Fade also is a little afraid of his uncle too, because he knows how psychotic and crazy he is to get to the point he's at. So like they have this like inner dialogue, and then Thufir is in there just kind of like separating them. Like, hey, your uncle's going to try to do this to you. Or I heard Fade's going to try to like, do this to you when you're not looking. So like, they're kind of like, there's this like interesting tension between them that you find out more about in the book. And then it was like, boom, Thufir's not even in this. And like, I guess he filmed scenes, that actor, but he wasn't in here. And so like, I was like, when is he going to show up? And then
was he kind of like a what is it in Game of Thrones? What's his name? Littlefinger? Was he kind of like that kind of character where he's just like
and he like he's even there in the book in the final fight too, and he basically shows up and he's like, I'm so sorry, Paul, like I didn't have a choice, like they were gonna kill me, and like I'm so sorry, I kind of betrayed you, and I was working with the Harkonnen. And Paul's like, no, it's fine, like you had to do what you had to do to survive it. And I think he dies, but there's that plot line that basically kind of gets omitted from the movie. And so, I kept thinking about him, like, where's he at? When is he going to show up? And then he does it, and yeah, it's a silly thing, but that was on my mind a little bit when I was watching it.
Yeah.
Huh. I mean, books versus movies, I think always there's a pretty large differentiation. Even with like anime adaptations, you kind of get these weird instances where they kind of condense things just because they're trying to put it into a movie, or they're trying to put it into some sort of form that doesn't allow for that long of a breath. But I think with
you said long breath.
Duuuust. But with Dune 2, I think if adaptations are going to go this way, in terms of, like Scott was saying, the technology is there and available, I think it's a very good premise moving forward, how we can start to take some of this like original IP and then turn it into something that's actually visually appealing, while having the actors and the technology to be able to portray that in a meaningful manner. Again, like books are so different because you're using your own imagination. Everybody's imagination is different. How you read is different. So let's get into the visuals, because I think you touched on such a great point. The visuals in this movie though are unparalleled. Stunning.
That part where we see the Harkonnen drop down and they're scaling up the mountain without like touching any of the rocks. I was like, cool. I was like, oh shit, this is gonna be incredible. That was like the first scene of the movie for me where I was like, oh, game on, like this is gonna be wild. I don't know. Yeah, any other, I mean, obviously the Coliseum on Giddy Prime where the Harkonnen are from, that was like so visually appealing.
Right. Even just a small within that same scene, the fireworks on Harkonnen area were like they were like ink plots.
So
like,
cool.
Yeah.
I was like, that's really interesting. I never would have thought of changing like a different, similar way of celebrating, but like having it look. It reminded me of like Osmosis Jones.
Yeah.
Or something.
yeah. I mean, it made sense. Like, if you're in a world with like no color, how do you show fireworks? Dude, so creative. Sorry.
Yeah. I love the architecture that they were able to pull off. I mean, because the Fremen don't necessarily have like outside architecture, but all their inside architecture is very like Moroccan-esque in terms of how intricate it was, utilizing just the designs and structures that they were able to create within these walls. The Harkonnens' architecture as well too is very brutalist in that sense, much like how they are in the movie, in the stories, etc. So,
so yeah, this guy deserves all the credit, and he worked super closely with Denis. But his name is Patrice Vermette, and he talked about like how he came up with all the designs of everything. He's done like a bunch of different movies as well, but yeah, he just like really went in deep. Oh, he's also worked with him on Sicario and Arrival. So he's worked with Denis on all of his movies.
God damn.
So like they just vibe super well together. And he was like, if you look at the detail in some of the room, there's like intricate carvings in everywhere. One thing that they wanted to really specify, and this was more towards Dune 1, I'm assuming this like counts for Dune 2 as well, but like they really tried to make everything really feel wide, like there was a big scope. So in that first movie where the Harkonnen drop down or the Sardaukar drop down, and you see like there's like 12 dudes walking shoulder to shoulder, that they're like everything needs to be wide and open, and everything needs to be thick because it needs to be able to stand like 800-mile-per-hour winds and all these things. Like everything was so well thought out.
Cool.
Yeah, and so that guy deserves a shit ton of credit, but like him and Denis are like on the same wave. Like he's like, we understand the same visuals together, and I think they 100% brought it.
I sent you guys like an Instagram reel that happened to be Guillermo del Toro, I believe, speaking about something that Denis had spoken about in terms of the medium that's being used. I think like cinematography wise, and you guys can view that sometime later. But
not gonna watch it.
Okay, cool. Essentially, he was saying the cinema is like really the cinema's. It's not necessarily the story isn't as important as the cinematic experience. Hence the reason why you're going to a place where the TV's fucking huge and the sound's fucking big. And I'm using the word fucking a lot because it's the emphasis of that over. Yeah, you get it.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah, dude, fucking do it, dude. Over the top, right? It's how vast something can seem, how small they were next to the legs of that walking spice gatherer, right?
Dude, that one was cool.
Yeah, the Harkonnen brain gatherer was so huge comparison to the tiny laser beam that was just across the way in this huge field. How the worms look in the sand when they're miles away, but you can see the dust coming up. The dust. Like that's what the cinema is for, and I think Denis really embodies that idea of taking in all of his movies, taking that thing and making it an experience that really works best in the cinema. Almost like how we talk about A24 and their visuals and how it's become kind of their shtick. I think Denis Villeneuve does a very good job at taking a story and can minimize the dialogue, but maximize the story because he's minimizing the dialogue.
Yeah. One scene that you brought up that I particularly like, and I want us to touch on, is the first part where Paul calls the big worm, like, call a big one, and then he calls the biggest one.
Oh, not that big.
Right. Oh no, he will die. Yeah, for real, right? But like, I thought that was really cool. They talked about how they wanted to make it seem like surfing, and I thought that was pretty good. Like it seemed like there was this certain shot where right before he peels off that back heel, I was like, man, that really kind of looks like somebody like doing a big wave just from the angle. Like if you ever looked at a GoPro on the back of a surfboard and like someone's going down this massive wave, it kind of looks like that. And I was like, wow, what an interesting comparison. You know what I mean? To like bring big waves surfing.
It's like when he fully stands, then it's like he's got it.
Yeah,
like, trying to find his balance, and then he fully stands. That back leg comes up. What was cool too about that was before they showed him riding it, they explain how it works without telling you how it works, which was cool. Because when I see people ride it, I'm like, why wouldn't the worm just fucking go under the sand and they just die? Like, but it's cool that they show it come in and like peel back where like now air's coming in, so the worm wouldn't go under, so the sand would, like, you know, it would just get clogged up with sand, so it's not gonna. So in turn, you can like turn it and stuff. Yeah, because it looked like he was gonna get rolled over, and then he would start turning it the other way. So this is really cool of them to show how it all works without telling you how it all works.
100%.
Though I didn't know how they would get off everyone in a caravan on a worm.
Okay.
Just fucking dive on that bitch, dude.
That was the only thing where I was like, oh, I get with one person, but like, how did they get like Lady Jessica in that basket?
They put the worm in park, okay? They put the worm in park.
Yeah, dude, after they got the whole family on, I was like, it wasn't that impressive that Paul did that.
Right.
They just fucking
just like, bring it around.
So I have a bigger question. I have a bigger question. Every time they use that little thumper, do they fucking lose it?
Dude, that's what I was thinking too. I was like, who's building this? Like,
like how do they have the hooks?
Technology. Granted, their technology is pretty advanced. Like their suit,
that collects water.
Yeah, like they do have tech, but then when you see where they live,
you're like, where is that coming from, dude? Yeah,
right.
So where are they getting the materials to build these thumpers like the same way every time? It felt like, because I think one part, I don't know if it was the first movie, or the second movie, they were like, "Oh, I built this." Like,
And in the book too, the part right before Paul jumps on the worm to ride for the first time, Stilgar gives him his thumper, and he says, "This is a good one. I made it myself. I made it specifically the way I like it." So like, it seems like it's individual to the person who uses it.
Interesting.
You think they'd look a little different?
Yeah, where are they getting these materials?
Hey, I didn't come up with the design. I think the thumper looks cool as hell.
It does look cool.
Yeah, but I did think about that too watching. But you're right. Like I'm like, where do they get the plastic from?
It's like unlimited.
But it's supposed to be like somewhere like it's 10191 AG. So it's not AD. It's like so far in the future. Someone calculated it. It's like somewhere 20,000 years in the future. That I don't know
where tremors live.
Yeah, everybody can make plastic. I have no idea.
Thumpers.
Right. But one thing that was interesting about that was in terms of like getting on in the books, it never describes how the Fremen actually get on the worms. So Denis had to come up with his own way of doing it. So of doing it, but like literally using the hooks and everything.
We're doing this guy. I don't know. We're gonna get it Dune.
Shai Hulud?
That's gonna 100% be the title of this episode. But yeah, so the hooks and everything was like something he came up with, and then I think that production designer was like, "Okay, this is
way.
Yeah, which makes sense. I know. I thought I did appreciate it. It was just when the whole family was on, I was like, wait, so Paul, I was like, how'd that work? But that's fine. I'm not gonna nitpick that.
And it's cool that they were like grappling hooks. Like first they were just hooks, and then he shoots them out.
Yeah, they were like freaking Daredevil batons,
and didn't miss his first time.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yep,
that was sick. Some other things that were pretty cool in this were, we get to see more of the weapons. We see that there's laser weapons and like guns. They didn't really show that at all in the first movie. Like there's one part where Paul kind of goes up on the hill and he has like that single shot pistol, but then I think Chani stops him, and that's about the only time. But like the laser guns in this were sick. Then they had that rocket launcher, and when they were underneath that sand crawler thing, and he shoots that rocket, and then it shows the guy in the ship look down, and then be like, and he sees her gun going down, and then he looks over to the side and he sees the missile like trying to fight through the shield to get in before it explodes. I love that. I thought
how cool was it too when that guy got hit by the rocket?
Oh yeah.
She goes boom, unloads on him, and he goes flying to the ship.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that was hilarious.
That
and
was
she's like, reload. I was like, that was fucking
Fucking
sick.
Zendaya, relax, bro.
that was cool, dude. That was all good. I mean, the parts too right before that, where the Fremen are gonna like jump in and invade the whole thing. They have it kind of reminded me of like the old Robin Hood cartoon where they use like those little like breathing tubes from the branches
With the
in the
fox and
water.
stuff? Yeah,
But
yeah,
instead of it, obviously they're in the sand. They have those breathing tubes, and as it got close, they all pop up and just start murking those people.
Yeah.
The action in this movie was top notch. Like
Yeah.
it was 100% top tier action movie of the year kind of action. And yeah, I don't know. Is there any fights that stand out to you guys?
For
from this
sure,
movie?
the last kind of big fight we get.
Elvis Presley,
with,
Timothy
Paul
Chalamet.
and
Elvis Presley,
Willy
Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a really cool knife fight.
Mhm.
Immediately I was like, dude, I wonder how many times they ran this
Yeah.
before they shot this. Like it was like
Yeah.
so quick, and you can't fuck up. It was just
Fucking long ass knife though, right? Timothy just getting fucking stabbed and like just
He got stabbed twice.
powering through it. Like
You said
what?
twice? Wow.
Because he got
Man.
stabbed in the
Shia
gut,
LaBeouf.
right? And
Yeah.
then I didn't even see the one in the shoulder. He's like, "Ugh," and I'm like, where the fuck did that come from? He got stabbed.
So
Yeah.
we
He's a
talked about this
Nagaib.
before, but when Austin Butler was fighting inside of the Coliseum, and they were drugged except for that one dude, and he was kind of having a hard time against the old Asian man. And it didn't
Oh.
like, well, obviously, dude, because we're going to talk about Shogun later. We know what old Asian men can do. But it didn't lead me to believe that he was better at fighting because of that situation. Also, too, you don't see him really fight other people that can test him. And in this situation, the last final battle, I was like, man, he's good, and you can see that he's good. But I mean, nothing from previously made me scared for Timothy's character.
I think the way I looked at
not
it
for
was
me.
like the way I looked at it was like they introduce him, right? He's like a King Joffrey.
Yeah.
Like he's just a fucking monster, right?
Mhm.
We don't know if he can fight. You find out he's gonna like, oh, are they drugged? And you're like, oh, okay. He's like as if they put King Joffrey and he's gonna kill people. Like, look how cool I am. But then they don't drug one guy. This is a test to see if he can actually fight. And you're like, oh fuck, he can throw down, and
Mhm.
he's crazy. So it's like
Right.
it adds another layer of like,
And he turned off his shield too, right?
yeah.
he
So
took
it's
off
like
his
it
shield,
it added that other layer of like, well, this guy's super unhinged. Like he's so confident in himself. He was like, fuck this, I'll throw off my shield and I'll just go at it with you. And he could have very well lost. He could have been thinking that too. Like, I might die here, but fuck it. you know?
Totally.
And the fact that he won, I was like, okay, that makes him kind of scary because he wants to live, but he also like would happily die in a great battle because maybe he
Right.
built that up in his head. Like even at the very end when he fights Paul, he's like, you know, like he like, what is it? Like he tells him it was a great match. You know, he's like,
Yeah, you fought well, Atreides, which
Yeah.
is what he says to the guy he kills in the Colosseum. So it's kind of cool. Like one guy, interesting enough too. Like if you go back to part one, that guy that he kills, like side fact, he actually
Mhm.
is the martial arts choreographer. So like he actually has his like real last name in the movie. I forgot what it is, like Juan or something, like Officer Juan or something like that. He actually taught that martial arts to all the actors,
Dude,
and
I
it's
love
based.
that.
Yeah, it's based off like a Filipino baton fight martial arts.
Eskrima.
Yeah, but not Eskrima. Like there's a certain other name that they were saying.
Like
Eskrimo?
Salit or something like that.
Yeah, Eskrima.
Yeah, there's Filipino knife fighting. I assume
Yeah, I
that's what
think
he's talking
that
about.
might be
Yeah,
what
yeah.
it is. Maybe it's knife fighting, but
Yeah.
yeah. So he taught them in real life, and then he got to like actually play his own character in a sense that wasn't in the books. But to give
Sick.
further,
That's like in the Game of Thrones when the fight choreography was the
not the
the
mountain,
Night Walker or whatever, the White Walker.
Oh
Like, he
yeah,
was
yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
lead
The
dude.
main, the lead, yeah, the lead
And
White
you're like,
Walker.
oh, he
That's
does all
right.
the choreography. Like, I love that. That's cool.
It is so cool. But to give more context, in the books, Paul describes that actually they don't really explain it too well in the movie, but it's a custom. So like if you're 2 leaders from a house, nobody can interfere. And it's basically like our leaders are going to sacrifice themselves so that the rest of their people or their men don't have to kill themselves, and whoever wins wins. It's like he won the war, so like you win everything. But also in the books he explains it that he's never fought without a shield, so that when he gets to this point where he has to fight someone who's equally as good without a shield, it changed the way he looked at things. Like he was like, oh wait, I don't have this protection, I can't move so well. And it kind of calls back to part 1 where he fights Gurney in the training center, and he's like, I got you, old man. He's like, yes, but you would have joined me in the afterlife, my lord. And so he basically uses that tactic, but sacrifices himself to then kill Fade.
Right,
so it's like a different layer of like, he didn't know how to fight this guy who knows how to fight without a shield, and that shows how crazy he is. Because if you're the head of a household, you're the next prince of this entire world, and you're saying, I don't need any other protection but the knife in my hand, and I'm going to kill you. That shows like how crazy you are to like risk your own life. Yeah, and then to do it for a show. So it's just like that's kind of an added thing. Again, it's one of the things that like, it may make sense more in the book, I think, but it still came across to me as like, dude, this guy's fucking wild. Like he's willing to just go nuts. And then it's also nuts that his uncle is willing to be like, hey, I didn't even give him an advantage for one of the dudes, because it was still a 3-on-1. And one of the guys is like, good. He's probably like one of the best Atreides fighters, and they're known for being one of the best fighters, one of the best soldiers in the galaxy. Like that's a kind of a big deal if you know.
Right. And I think it makes sense, like what you were saying. The uncle testing him in the movie, he's like, I want to see what you're made of, to see if you can really rule. But at the same time, like you were saying, the uncle kind of is scared of this guy. So he's like, if he could just die right now, then I don't need to worry about it too.
It's kind of a win-win.
It's a win-win, yeah.
Yeah, it's totally like a win-win for him in that situation. But then it would be weird too, because it would kind of relieve, like it would be a relief because now his nephew's not going to kill him, but also like who's going to take over as heir?
He's clearly dying.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting. They definitely set up some things in this, I think, for the future. And also like, I think just things are explained a little bit better. And some things are enhanced by reading the book. And I think for me, some things were not. One of the things that threw me off again with Paul's sister, that we do eventually get to see a vision after he drinks like the sandworm bile. We see a vision of his sister in the future, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. What did you guys think about that cameo?
I couldn't stop looking at her lips. They were so like pointy. The way they put on her lip makeup. She's got a really attractive face. That's what I was looking at. But at the same point in time, but in terms of facts, just see her face and her like beautiful features. But
she looks like the prettiest alien ever to me.
I mean,
if that makes sense.
Her eyes are a little bit.
They're out there.
Like it matches her face. Like it's weird.
Does.
Like everything else is not taken away. Like, you know what I mean? Like it works because everything else works. I don't know.
Totally.
It does help because you see the fetus situation that doesn't really play into it, but when you see her in character, it really brings the voices and the talking to, especially with the mom and her, a little bit more into clarity. And Paul now has like this vision of her, and I think for me it made them feel more attached, made them feel more familial. It made it feel like there was something to look forward to moving forward. Obviously they're on a beach somewhere, or she was on a beach.
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be Arrakis, where Paul does bring the oceans back, because that's what they were like saving all the tears for, or the water from, right? Because also I was wondering like, how do they pull the water out? And it was cool getting that scene. And then you're like, this whole thing underneath here is just filled up of like dead bodies, water like that. That's pretty crazy.
Hey, you want to go swim in the dead body water?
Yeah, dude. And then it just gets collapsed on, and I'm like, how many hundreds of years was that? And now it's just wasted underground. That like kind of
they're gonna just have to probably figure out a way to mine it out or something.
The Fremen Society is so cool, just based off of that pool.
Right?
Like, what?
It's a cool pool.
Cool pool.
Mr. Poops.
So cool.
Yeah, the Fremen are pretty wild. I think we'll learn more about them in the future and stuff. But yeah, what an interesting concept that they created. I don't know. Is there anything else that we're missing that you guys want to mention about Dune Part 2?
Another thing too was like all of the like wardrobe was like
Yeah.
freaking awesome. Like I think that's like one of the big things that will differ a movie and a show. Sometimes like a show could be real good, but like certain wardrobe on certain people just like will look cheap and it'll take me out of it. But like this movie, like everything just fits that world. Like it's great. Like even the knife, like it's an old knife that's been passed down, and like every like the Harkonnens like gear and shit look like sick, and like it looked like it was aged, but like it kind of reminded me of like in Superman when the other Kryptonians come down and they have like those masks and shit.
The oxygen shield mask things.
Yeah. All of that was so cool. The sound was great in this movie too.
Hans Zimmer.
There was some like the soundtrack was crazy good. And then even just like the I mean, I guess watch it in theaters so you get the full effect. But there's a couple moments you're like, oh shit, you get kind of startled because like it was just like, well, I don't even know what is the word for that.
Good.
I mean, it was just done at such a high level.
It's like the movie's playing and they make all the sound effects while it's going, right? Like,
right.
It was just like well done.
I would love that job. But yeah, I mean, he like spared no expense. I mean, you want an epic soundtrack, you get Hans Zimmer. Like you obviously the cinematographer worked for him a long time and made incredible movies too. So like he makes sense. Denis has just been like fine tuning his craft to make this book he's always wanted to make come to life. It's like they just did everything so right. And it seems like, they're again, like there's no reason why they shouldn't make another movie. There's no reason why they can't keep extending this universe. Like it just is wild. I agree. I like one of my favorite, like even the choice of making all the Harkonnen bald and like, like that was such an interesting choice. And they're all kind of pale because they come from this white and black world. Like that stuff is super interesting. Like everybody from these different sects or planets or creeds all look uniquely different and look like they fit still in this world. And it's just like, wow, it's so imaginative. Like, I think he so cool from a visual standpoint. God, it's so cool.
There was another thing that kind of made me laugh that maybe shouldn't have made me laugh. Every time fucking Dave Bautista killed a guy, I'm like, oh fuck, dude. Like, he's like, where? He's like, I don't know, maybe you should get some rest. Shut the fuck.
Slapped that dude's head.
I'm like, whoa! Like I don't know. It was just so jarring. I just like started laughing every time. I was like, everyone must be like, I don't want to work when he's around. Like, like can you imagine? Like, I might die now because he walked in the room. Like, that's freaking insane.
Can you imagine the guy that has to like replace the guy you just murdered? You're like, I don't want that job. Like, you have it. No, you have to. You're next in line. I don't want it. No, you have to.
But that was a cool scene too when they land and Dave Bautista's like, no, fuck this, let's get it done. And then all his guys are getting picked off, and then Paul starts coming and he's almost like, this guy's a demon. And he starts running.
Yeah.
And he's like,
and we see the flashes of Paul.
Cool. Yeah. That was really cool.
Yeah.
You just see that. I was like, this is like some Batman shit.
Yeah.
Like, it was really cool.
It was. They just did certain shots super, super well. I mean, I'm a big fan of the movies. Like I always like to tell people, go to the movies. It's the reason why we get these big budget things. It's because we go and we buy our ticket. It goes back to the movies, but also like movie theater owners aren't like they're not like super, super rich, as I've come to find out. So it's like they really benefit from it too. But this is one of those movies where it's like you're gonna miss out by not seeing it in theaters. And I don't think that about every movie. Like I want to support every movie in theaters, but this is one I'm like, you will miss out on something by not seeing it in theaters.
And we have a couple friends that went and watched this in 4DX. I've never had the opportunity to do this, but
do they have dust blown up their buttholes?
Just like air, like right up there. No, but he said there are
dusty.
There are effects where like the chair will like shake or like it'll blow air or. If it's raining, like water will fall and stuff. And like he said, it helped get them immersed. He said when the first Harkonnen got shot in the head, it like blew air in his head.
Oh,
and he's like, holy shit. Like it like startled him as it got shot.
Dude, I mean, it did that for me without the air. So I can only imagine.
Like Jesus.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to
real.
go watch it in 4DX.
Totally. You have to like walk in, you leave the theater, sand's all in your shoe. It's in your like Dune popcorn bucket. You have like sandy popcorn.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be great.
But I mean, it's cool. Like that's another type of experience you can go and see now.
I want to do it. Yeah, you
Experience
sold
these
me.
nuts.
I want to Dune it. You sold me on it.
Hey, doing it up, dude.
All right. So yeah, that was Dune Part 2. Anything else before we move on to Shogun?
Go watch it. Go to the theater and watch it. And watch the first one first. If you haven't, don't be
Yeah.
one of those people who's like, I'll watch this one and then watch. Like, don't. Watch the first
watch
one
the first
and then
one.
watch.
So much context in the first one.
If you
You're gonna
don't-
not know what's going on.
Yeah, you don't know what the
anymore.
fuck is
Like,
going on if you don't watch the
If
first
you
one.
don't want to, we recapped it over on Challenge Accepted, all of
There
Dune
you
Part
go.
1 with a bunch of insight too, which is
Do it.
a lot shorter than watching the whole movie, but we recap most of the big themes that you'll find leading into Dune Part 2. So just
Do it.
throwing that out there.
And
All
it's
right.
on Hulu right now if you get Hulu.
Hulu. I think it's on
Dune Part
Netflix
1
too.
is Netflix.
It just
and Hulu
it just left
and
Netflix.
Max. It did?
Yeah,
Oh shit, nice.
it
Good
was
call
like
out.
leaving in so many days. Like I think it was end of February, but I guess it's
That's a
on
good
Max
point.
and I saw it on Hulu.
Nice.
No excuses, guys. Get a Dune. Right? And
All
that's
right.
the last of that.
Something else on Hulu that just dropped very recently, and I think Drake will probably have the most to say about this. But funny enough, it's interesting how like things come in Hollywood where there's just certain themes that kind of match. Well, talk about a book that was adapted into a TV show, and the TV show bombed and then was adapted into something else that's now amazing. Well, we're talking about Shogun.
Shogun.
Yeah,
Shogun.
this has been really great so far. It is really doing a great job of just kind of like engulfing you in this world too. You do have to pay attention, but I do like that a lot of it is in Japanese, and it just really is getting to the heart of feudal Japan. I think in the 1700s and like what life must have been like. Yeah, Drake. Well, 1700th century, but like 160 whatever.
Something or other.
Yes.
The-
I only watched the
Thought
first
about
half
this
of the first
before.
episode, guys. So.
oh, first
I was like, I'm
gonna.
gonna practice it so I don't mess it up. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like that's what it is. So yeah, take it away, Drake.
So Shogun was a novel of Japan made or written by James Clavell, and it was written. The publication date is 1975. By 1990, the book sold 15 million copies worldwide, so it was pretty freaking popular. It got so popular that they ended up making a I want to say it was a movie or a series
Yeah, I think it was a series before.
in 76, which was kind of it was a miniseries in 1980, and it starred
Okay.
Richard Chamberlain, Toshiro Mifune, who was a really prominent Japanese actor at the time, Yoko Shimada, and John Rhys Davies. Whoa, crazy, right?
I
You've
don't know who
him?
they are.
He was Gimli in Lord of the Rings.
Oh shit, no way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So supposedly, I watched a review on that original miniseries, and they said that it was more from the Anglo-Saxon point of view, and the current one we do have, they have
Right.
mentioned in these
So like,
types of
yeah,
things.
the way it starts is like kind of around John Blackthorne, right? And this isn't necessarily about him. Like he's kind of the proxy for us to understand things in English, right? But like it really does follow more of these Japanese lords, specifically your Lord Toranaga, right?
Yes. So the idea of Lord Toranaga, he was at one point in time a family member of when there was a shogunate. At that point in time, yeah, there is no shogun anymore. There's just kind of a democracy of these individuals that are sharing power, but at the same point in time, they don't want to share power. They're afraid of Hiroyuki Sanada's character, your Lord Yoshii Toranaga, because he has the power and the availability to take over. And as things are taking place within the story, just in the first 2 episodes, you're finding out that this small leadership wants to essentially get rid of Toranaga. And when Sir Blackthorne comes through, you're seeing this Spain/Portugal conquistador type situation where they've split up territories in Asia, and whoever gets there first, they have claim over it. Whereas Blackthorne is a Christian from England, and obviously the Catholic Christian battle or the Protestant battle. And because John essentially, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, he wants to go to Japan, figure stuff out, and try to help Japan defeat or convince Japan to help defeat the Spaniards and the Portuguese,
Right.
et cetera.
Yeah, and from my understanding, that wasn't like initially his plan. He kind of washes up there, but then he realizes what's happening, right? He
Yes.
realizes that the Catholic Portuguese are trying to take over everything, and he's like, oh, like you said, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. He realizes that he can be an asset to Lord Toranaga because he knows their tricks, he knows their routes, he knows their weapon stashes, their plans. And so because of that, he's like, oh, this is one way I'm not going to get killed, and two, like if I make myself useful to him, it can help him out and take out my enemies.
Yes.
And then, you know, maybe the London or the UK can like lay claim to like Japan. So it's like an unusual partnership that's formed. And yet in the show, which is again mostly in Japanese, even though when he's speaking Portuguese, it's still all in English.
Yeah.
So I think for like American viewers, you know, this is it's not like completely in subtitles. And I think that's like it's easier to watch maybe that way.
No, it's definitely easier to watch, and you're getting to see more of the Japanese side. And you would think, oh, well, aren't most East Asians Buddhists? But Bushido in itself has a lot of similarities and some renaissance of Christianity within Bushido as a whole. So Bushido is that fighting code of the samurai spirit, etc. And to see the kind of Catholicism and how it spread, some of the individuals within the show, much like Ana Sawai's character Tora Mariko, she is a Catholic in this situation. She speaks Portuguese, which happens to be English, and she's now conflicted because Blackthorn is telling her that there's places in Macau that they have Japanese Ronin, and you know they're building armies essentially to conquer. And the Japanese individuals in general, Japanese people in general, are very prideful, and they're very about Japan and Japanese people. And so to hear that, when Toranaga heard that, he essentially hears of a way moving forward to help restore Japan to what it could be, what it can be, make Japan great again, and also kind of but fight his oppressors in that leadership group that want him dead based off of stuff that is irrelevant.
Yeah, absolutely. From like a political standpoint, it's so interesting because like you mentioned it before, you know, the shogunate dies and he splits it into 5 regions till his son can come up and lead, right? And take over and become the shogun again. But he's basically, it's like a 1-on-4, but at the same time, now he has knowledge of, like, not only does he have to defend against these 4 other factions in Japan, I guess in different prefectures or however they are managed their territories. So he has to defend himself and his clan against them, but also he knows a greater enemy is coming. And it's funny, I've heard the comparison to like, this is like the new Game of Thrones. And it's different in that it's not a fantasy, right? Like there are elements of history, like real history here, but there is like political infighting and betrayal and backstabbing and stuff. But also you can look at it like the Portuguese army is kind of like the White Walkers. We know this oncoming threat is there in the background. He knows about it. He's scared of it. But at the same time, he's too worried about the enemy at his front door. Like literally who's coming into his house and trying to murder him. And you find this out in like the 2nd episode that he's like badass. I mean, he's one step ahead. He's regal. He's smart. He's open to things, but he has that like Japanese kind of like stoicism, but like badassness. Like, God, man, Hiroyuki Sanada in this is just phenomenal. So good.
Yeah, he's
but
so
like,
good in the
that whole premise is really setting. So I would say like in episode 1, it was a little slow for me. Just to be real, like I was like, okay, where is this going? And it's a lot of setting things up. And I was really having to pay attention a lot to like follow what was going on in the story. But then by episode 2, you kind of get into like, what's the real conflict? Like, where's the danger coming from? Yeah. And you start seeing that more. You're like, oh shit, like these are all these different political things happening in this world. And again, if you keep in the back of your mind that people are stockpiling weapons not too far away and taking Ronin from Japan and putting them in their army, and they're going to come up and murder you eventually. Like, he has a lot of shit to watch out for.
Yeah. To your point in the first episode, I didn't think it was necessarily slow, but I was like so focused on this Blackthorn character. I don't know if they meant for him to be so dislikable. Because like when I'm watching him, I'm like, who the fuck is this white dude? Like, is this Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai? Like, what are we doing here? Like, because again, I know a lot of people don't necessarily want to have this like Anglo-Saxon character be the main, white knight that comes and saves the day. And I don't think that's going to be the case because Hiroyuki Sanada does such a great job at managing his own. To your point in episode 2, all of the regents are all taken over by these Catholics and or by money, right? And or power. So their sole focus is on those things and they're not even worried about Japan. Hiroyuki's the only person worried about Japan and his people. And you can tell by how he interacts with the Taiko's son, how he acts with like the servants and the people around him. He's not tyrannical. He's not trying to be a boss. He's being empathetic, etc. And so he do a really good job.
Great leader. Yeah, like he's actually being a great leader. Like where he's like, even though he's like watching out for his life, the best thing for Japan is for him to stay alive. Yeah. Because if he does it, then you're right. These people who are ruled by money or their religion, again, like not to make a comparison to Dune, it's not going to be necessarily a good thing for the Japanese people or the culture.
No. And so for individuals who don't know about like the feudal system back in the day, the shogun is essentially the person who rules over Japan. The emperor, there is an emperor, but he's only really that by name. The shogun it controls pretty much all of the warring parties, etc. Then you have these other factions or these other individuals who are called daimyo, and they kind of have their own riches, almost like dukes, but with armies. And then you have the samurai in that class, and that's kind of how it's defined within Japanese culture. So for them to have another shogun, it essentially is the person who rules Japan. And obviously, if you want to fight for power, or if you think like, oh, I like my Catholic religion and I want that to be prominent, you can't have a shogun who doesn't want that, and you can't have a shogun who's willing to take power if you want the power. So it's a very interesting struggle within the feudal system, because now remember there's 5 regents, there's not a shogun. So they went from feuding to not feuding, and in order to kind of get Japan back, what it seems like is that they have to go back to that feudal system again.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think I only accept the Game of Thrones comparison, because it's shot so beautifully. Yeah. There's a lot of like really nice, just quality shots in this. And the dialogue is fantastic. So good. But also it's that political infighting and who's trying to get the power, who's trying to get the throne. And is really what it is, right? And like, there's, the Starks, the Toranagas, and then there's everybody else. There's the Lannisters, what is it? Bartholomews? What are they called?
Yeah, the Bartholomews.
The Bartholomews.
What is it? What's the
polar
one?
bear dogs.
Bartholomew brothers.
Yeah. The Bartholomews. It's this show is very much like playing Ghost of Tsushima for the first time. All the landscapes are very beautiful. Everything's very like Japanese-esque. There's lots of particular detail. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, and you can just tell like the dialogue and everything is written so well. It just seems like such a quality show. Again, I think that would be my warning for people. Like, you do have to pay attention. There is an element to it if you don't know Japanese where you do have to like read the subtitles, and like you really have to like kind of follow things. It doesn't spoon feed it to you, which I really appreciate. There's so much times now it shows where it's like they just like say things out loud. You're like, yeah, I could get that. Like, why did you have to like beat me over the head with this explanation? This isn't that. This is going to treat you like an adult. It's going to open things up like a book. You have to kind of dive in, pay attention to it. But I think the payoff is so big. And especially by the end of episode 2 is where I was like, oh shit, this is going to be wild. Because then it does what every great HBO show does. It kind of shows you a little snippet of what's coming next. And you're like, God damn, this is going to be crazy.
The battles are going to be fucking intense. And I'm glad they only showed snippets of it where like they're beheading people, or some of the fighting is like accurate. At the same point in time, the brutalism of the way Japanese wage war is going to come into the fray here, and I hope they show it because it's important, I think, for the authenticity.
Yeah, there is one part, spoiler alert for this in the first episode, but there is a guy, part of Blackstone's crew, that gets captured. And I forget, he says the wrong thing. Yup. But they basically have a giant boiling pot that you would see like in witchcraft, and like just boil the dude alive.
Yeah, dude. They just do hot pot with that dude for like hours.
They hot potted the shit out of that guy.
And he's fucking
It was brutal though.
Yo, his skin's melting off. He's like screaming. Oh my goodness.
And so that's why it has a little bit of that gruesomeness that you would find in Game of Thrones again. Again, it's not, one is fantasy based, but at the same time, like if you look at Game of Thrones where it starts off, it's very grounded, very realistic. Like this is how this world works. And it has that type of edge to it. So yeah, man. So episode 2 again for me is where I got really sold. The characters are kind of like cementing who they are, where they stand in this war, this upcoming war, and who the different factions are, how people are. But even like the backstabbing, like little finger kind of people are really good and interesting too. You're like, ooh, why are they doing this? Ooh, I hate that.
When,
like there's those people you kind of love to hate.
When Hiroyuki's character invites Blackthorn to his home and puts him up in his room, and so he sleeps in the guest room, and then the assassin who works for
we don't know yet.
We don't know yet, but is in his house.
I think we have an idea. Yeah,
yeah. She was working, I think, in the house as a person.
Right.
And then got turned, and then she tried to like kill Hiroyuki's character, and Hiroyuki just like stop. Right in the carotid. She's just choking. He just watches her, walks her down, and then pushes her. She falls backwards onto the Zen garden, and she's just bleeding out. Just like
that was tough.
Bruh. Yeah, it was also too because you don't necessarily see men kill women a lot. In this context, obviously she's an assassin.
Too bad, right?
Yeah, too bad though, bruh. You want to strike, you're gonna get strike back, cuz.
Yeah.
But I think that's another thing that's very interesting and things to take to the bank, because that is the case, right? With the idea of like ninja or shinobi, they weren't necessarily someone I fight with honor, attacking somebody, not face front, not like announcing yourself, like that's considered dishonorable. Totally. And so for Hiroyuki, in the middle of the night, secret, boo boo boo. But to dispatch her as easily as he did makes you understand his power and understand his battle acumen.
Totally. Yeah.
With just that one scene.
Totally. And he's not the kind of leader that like needs a bunch of other people around him to protect him. It's like he can handle himself.
Oh, bro.
Yeah, I love it. He's done such a good job. I think he's been trying to make this show for a while. I know he has a bigger role than just acting in it. They were saying, I was watching some behind the scenes, and he's like actually going in there and setting up some of the fight scenes. He's making sure people are holding their swords the right way, holding their postures the right way. And they even used like an older form of dialogue. He compared it to like how us Americans read Shakespeare. He's like, that's the type of Japanese they're using in terms of how they're delivering or like the dialogue that they're speaking. So man, it is just so quality on every part of it. Man, I'm so stoked. Yeah, I think we're gonna get it. It comes out on Tuesday nights, which is awesome because not a lot of things come out on Tuesday nights anymore. So it's like that midweek, just kind of like little like the treat that we're going to be getting.
Doing it.
Sure.
There's been reception too on the Japan side, especially from this guy named Kenmatsu Daira. He played the Tokugawa Yoshimune in The Unfettered Shogun, and also played Tokugawa Ieyasu, who essentially was a very formative character, like literal human being that he played before. And he's also played Yoshi Toranaga in his acting career, and he's like praising Hiroyuki Sanada's acting and his effort to make it historically correct. So there's good coming from all sides.
Hell yeah, that was awesome. Well, yeah, man.
I know there's an option on Hulu to watch it in dub, but I'd probably recommend not doing that because I'm sure there's scenes in this show where you are not supposed to, like when like the people who are speaking another language aren't supposed to understand Japanese and vice versa. And if everything is understandable, then sometimes that goes over your head as a viewer. So just watching the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. One, I didn't even know that was an option. And two, there's a part where I forgot what her name is, Lady something, is translating between Blackstone and Toranaga. The way they cut it together is so cool because it seems like they're having a conversation, but she's actually translating it. And that would ruin that scene. So as much as you can, do not watch it in the dub. Watch it as they intended it to be seen because it's so good.
Yeah,
All
Honest
right.
Wise really good. Honest Wise really good.
Mm-hmm. But hell yeah. Yeah, it's been an awesome week. We've definitely watched some cool stuff. I got to figure out a time to go watch Dune again. We have a new Shōgun coming out very soon again on Tuesday. So let us know what you guys all think about these movies and shows. And yeah, hit us up. We're super close to 500 or 5,000 downloads. We're very, very close.
Ooh.
So if you could go back to listen to some old episodes, we appreciate it.
Please.
You sharing it with somebody else who might like some of the things that we talk about week in and week out. We'd really love you sharing it with them too. But again, that would be an awesome achievement. I think we'd all be really stoked about that. So please do that, and let you guys have the final words.
Thank you for sticking with us.
Good enough. Come on, day.
The Joystick Show.
If you've enjoyed what you've been listening to, we'd really appreciate a follow, subscribe, and a review. Just how we like chatting with our friends, please share this with yours. Feel free to join the squad and follow us at JoyStickShow Joystick Show on Twitter and Instagram, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you feel like submitting topics or questions to be discussed on future episodes, you can email us at joystick.show@gmail.com. As always, thank you, peace out, and make it a great rest of your week.